Gambia's pharmaceutical service validates its national medicine policy. Belgium returns Patrice Lumumba's remains, the Congolese independent hero, more than 60 years after his assassination. And humanitarian organizations in Uganda expressed concern over the high influx of DRC refugees amid limited resources. But this and more coming ahead on The World Today. This is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in detail. Now the National Pharmaceutical Service with support from partners and stakeholders on Tuesday validated the national medicine policy at a day workshop held at the Carnival Digital in Senegambia. Now, the workshop was convened to review and ensure the document is people-centered to cater for the needs of the patients. Moses Imendi has the details in this report.
The validation of the National Medicines Policy 2022 to 2025 is being carried out through the joint knowledge and experience of the Health Ministry, experts, and stakeholders. It is said to be in use after the validation workshop. The policy seeks to boost the availability of essential medicines to the population at affordable prices and ensure continuous education and professional training for pharmaceutical staff. It also aims to deliver adequate legislation leading to effective regulation of pharmaceuticals and many more. Mr. Babanding Sabali, Director of National Pharmaceutical Service, in his opening remark described the progress as a milestone in the development of the health sector and underscored that accessible health cannot be achieved in the absence of essential medicines.
However, access to health cannot be fulfilled without availability of essential medicines. Therefore, this statement affirms that quality healthcare delivery is synonymous to optimal functioning of pharmaceutical sector. A weak pharmaceutical sector cannot support quality health delivery system. According to WHO, access to medical products and technology is one of the 6 building blocks of health system.
He noted that the second largest spending of the public health budget is on medicines, medical products and vaccines, and added that for quality health delivery to be attained, emphasis on ensuring medicines and its supply security in the country must be projected. Dr. Amadou Samate, Minister of Health, said the policy is to map out a new direction for the health sector development and will serve as a basis for driving the sector's priorities and plans.
The policy has attempted in its best ability to capture the national vision as set in the National Health Plan and the National Development Plan, and in line with the Global Health Vision. This document has a lot of policy reorientation and innovative strategies that could lead the country in the aspirations of the government. The policy will provide a new direction for the health sector development. It will also serve as a basis for driving health sector priorities and planning as a good resource allocation process, and all other related pharmaceutical policies will be anchored on this.
He revealed that the pharmaceutical services hopes for a reformation within the next 5 years to make the central medical stores a public enterprise and to avail the CMS mandate and autonomy to conduct many of its activities, thereby improving the availability of essential medicine. Dr. Desta Tiruni, World Health Organization representative, said underfinancing of medicines and the supply chain system, coupled with other factors, has affected the availability of medicines and highlighted the ambitions of the policy.
So it's a time of change. This policy was developed in the wake of the 4 years of the COVID pandemic. Across the world, the epidemic has exposed the gaps in the health systems. Based on the lessons learned and the quickly shifting epidemiological transition, this policy has forward-looking solutions for Gambia's health sector. It intends to create more resilient systems that can better cope with epidemics and the growing and more resilient epidemics and the growing needs of the Gambia.
The Gambia has been grappling with a broken health system as the gap between expected and actual performance against targets remain large. The most important contributing factor to this gap is said to be insufficient resources. Public hospitals are often devoid of medicines, while exorbitant drugs and treatment in private health clinics continue to frustrate ordinary Gambians. Moses Mendy, Eyeafrica News.
Elsewhere in the continent now, barely a week after the visit of the Belgian royal family to DR Congo, the European country has decided to return the remains of the Congolese independence hero, Patrice Lumumba, as part of efforts to bolster relations between the two countries. Now, according to some Congolese citizens, the gesture is not enough to mend the colonial-ruled misconducts meted on their people by the Belgians. Now, Patrice Lumumba was the first democratically elected Congolese prime minister, but was assassinated in 1961 by his country's soldiers supported by the Belgians. Here's more details of that in this report.
A reckoning with Belgium's colonial past. Remains of Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba being handed over to his family in Belgium. Belgian authorities had planned to hand over a tooth believed to be Lumumba's only remains last year, but they postponed it due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The handover marks part of reconciliation efforts between Belgium and the DRC, which suffered widespread abuses during the colonial period. However, some Congolese feel it's not enough to atone for the colonial-era abuses.
The return of Lumumba's remains is not a very big thing for me. I was expecting Belgium to support our country economically and help equip our army because we have many security problems.
Belgium's King Philip was recently in the DRC for his first visit to his country's former colony. He handed over a mask that was on display at a Belgian museum to Congolese officials and expressed regrets for the atrocities committed by his ancestors.
I want to express my deepest regret for the past injuries and the pain caused by the discrimination inflicted on the DRC during the colonial rule.
Belgian authorities agreed to return Patrice Lumumba's remains in 2020 at the height of the global Black Lives Matter protest.
It's now 61 years since we've been demanding the return of Patrice Lumumba's remains from Belgium. They have heeded our call and given the Congolese people the dignity they deserve. But they should also compensate his family and the country for having played a role in his death.
Patrice Lumumba rose to power to become the DRC's first democratically elected prime minister at the age of 34. He was assassinated in 1961 by Congolese rebels backed by Belgium for his anti-colonial stance. His body is reported to have been cut to pieces and dissolved in acid by a Belgian police officer.
Patrice Lumumba is regarded as a hero not just in the DRC but across the continent as well for being a leading voice of African liberation. His remains will be taken around the country before being buried in the capital Kinshasa later this month.
From the report, the DR Congo next to Zimbabwe, where health workers are not reporting to work as part of their efforts to force authorities to meet their demands of increased allowances and better working conditions. Now, cognizance of the effects of the ongoing strike, the health authorities have been negotiating with the frustrated nurses. Here's more details of that in this report.
They are meant to be in the hospital wards attending to patients, but are instead gathered outside to plot how best to press the government to address their grievances. Dozens of nurses followed through on a threat to withdraw their services over low pay.
Majority of them received something like 20,000 RTGs, which is, according to official rate, 20,000 is around $60 US. In the black market rate, 20,000 is around $30 US a month. And to expect somebody to have a living with $30 US a month is just a mockery.
On Sunday, the government announced a 100% increment for all public servants to cushion them against rising inflation. Health workers say that offer was not presented to them officially, and even if it had, it would have been rejected. Health workers are demanding that their salaries be paid in US dollars.
The workers are expecting an equivalent of $540 US, which we used to get before 1 October 2018. So that's the salary that we want.
Health workers also want improved provision of essential supplies at government facilities.
We've got a 1 year without Rocephin, which is the drug of choice, the easiest drug, which is costing about $1. And also we don't have Paracet, the Paracet which is well known by the public. And as there, we don't have Paracet for about a year now.
On Monday afternoon, officials from the Health Services Board, under which all government health workers fall, were locked in negotiations with the health workers, who have issued a grim prognosis if the current impasse is not resolved swiftly.
We are going to have a loss of life. People are going to die who were not supposed to.
And from that report there in Harare, Zimbabwe, next to Ukraine, where the Ukrainian farmers have expressed their frustration over the blockage of their country's seaport, which has disrupted export activities in the European country. Some of their farm produce were destroyed during the fighting, leaving the world battling against food scarcity and poorer countries among the hardest hit. Now, Ukrainian authorities blame Russia for the appalling economic circumstances. Here's more details of that in this report.
Dmitry Skorniakov runs what was one of Ukraine's largest agricultural enterprises, but 3/4 of his land is now held by the Russians. With seaports blocked, he's having trouble exporting grain from last year's harvest.
Now we still have a huge store, a huge amount of grain which is still not exported, and in a month we'll have new harvest of winter wheat and rapes, and it is a huge problem at the moment.
These giant sacks are full of last year's harvest, some damaged in the fighting before the Russians withdrew from here. This great pile of corn is no longer fit for consumption. The field storage bags were destroyed in the fighting and it's been exposed to the elements. Now it has to be thrown away. Some grain is getting out, loaded onto trucks to take to Romania or by train to Poland. It's much slower and more expensive. Earlier, Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Agriculture told me of the limitations of these alternative routes.
We could reach the maximum of up to 2 million tons per month by these routes. It's only not more than half of the possibility of the sea. So we could cover 40–50% only of what we need.
Even if shipping lanes are reopened, it could still take years to get back to normal. This is prime agricultural land, but when the Russians retreated, they mined the fields. So now they lie fallow, and all along the road here are these signs warning people to stay away. These tractors were blown up by mines, but that's the least of Dmitry Skorniakov's worries.
The biggest problem is that agriculture producer who is not able to sell grain now doesn't have money to buy, because all credit programs from international suppliers are stopped right now, and we don't have enough to seed. So next year I expect it will be much worse than this year.
Ukraine and Russia are both major grain exporters. Russia blames Western sanctions for the shortages. Ukraine blames the blockade of the Black Sea. But until this is resolved, the world faces a growing food crisis, with the poorest countries the biggest victims.
And the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war is affecting Ukrainian farmers, but of course, the rest of the world, I should say, as well. And from the report there, we now take a break and come back shortly. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back, and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin, and this is Eyeafrica TV, and let's now look at the rest of the stories. The Chief Executive Officer of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, Gambia Secretariat, Monday disclosed that the date for the 2022 OIC Summit is currently on the discussion between different principles of the UMMAH. Now, speaking to journalists at a press conference at the Sadauda Karaba Jawara Conference Center, DIBBA reiterated Gambia's commitment of hosting the largest gathering of world Islamic leaders in 2022. Here's more details of that in this report.
The government put up efforts to engineer an effective implementation of all project portfolios that are under preparation for the hosting of the OIC Summit later this year. The construction of urban roads and the VVIP ultra-modern lounge have both registered progress, and now the construction of a luxurious 5-star hotel will commence in the next month. But Gambians remain doubtful about the country's ability to host the summit, with many believing that OIC project components will not see completion before the expected timeline. Yankuba DIBBA, CEO of OIC Gambia Secretariat, affirmed that the Gambia will host the summit, explaining that the summit date is flexible and subject to discussions and renegotiations.
The things we are dealing with are infrastructure. And some or most of the things that we require in this infrastructural development require supplies. And as you know, or as you might have known, supply chain all over the world have been affected. So the date is not cast in any stone. The dates are flexible in the sense that they can be discussed, they can be renegotiated, but that goes through a process. And that process is still on. As I said, I'm not in a position now to tell you precisely what the date would be. This is being worked out, within and among the different principles of the UMMAH. But what is not in doubt is that the summit will take place in the Gambia. And in the not too distant future, we should be able to advise or inform you with regards to a tentative date.
The OIC Gambia Summit is expected to spur massive development upgrade in the Gambia, particularly on infrastructure. Mr. DIBBA believes that the development projects will turn the Gambia into international meeting and investment hub. It is also set to boost tourism in the country, he added. He called on Gambians to embrace the project and view it as a national project.
As Gambians, we really want to appeal to everybody to see this as a national project, to see this as a badge of honor, that if we succeed in attaining the projects that we want to put in place, we are putting Gambia on a different pedestal. So I think this is the message that we want, to be given out to the general public. The date is significant, but it's relative. It's relative. What it's more important is that all these development projects will remain. You will not roll them like a mat and take them away. They will remain in the Gambia, isn't it? I mean, look at the facility we are in today. This is part of the OIC projects. It's the best in the sub-region. Can't we be proud of that?
The 5-star hotel is expected to have 400 beds and 60 luxury suites. The OIC Gambia Secretariat was able to mobilize over $300 million for the construction of OIC summit facilities. The development project is funded by various partners, but the Saudi government has been in the front foot of the project funding. The Organization of Islamic Conference is the second largest intergovernmental organization after the United Nations, with a membership of 57 states, covering 4 continents. It is the collective voice of the Muslim world to ensure and safeguard their interests on economic, socio, and political areas. Moses Mendy, Eyeafrica News.
And from the report there onto our final story now, because the conflict in DR Congo between the government forces and the M23 rebel movement continue to force more people to flee their homes to neighboring countries, including Uganda. Authorities of this African nation and humanitarian groups express concern over the prevailing situation. Most of the people affected by the war are women and children. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Lucky to be alive, Nyirawira Nyatsoka and her children have made it to safety. The family of 5 fled their home in Ituri province in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo after heavy fighting in their village. The family is now settling in at the Nyakabande Refugee Transit Center in southwestern Uganda. The center is home to more than 30,000 refugees who have been forced out of their homes following fighting between DRC government forces and numerous armed groups in the eastern part of the country. Nyirawira says despite the hardships at this center, she would rather stay here than go back to the DRC.
It is great relief that we are here, though we have to endure sleeping on the ground in the cold nights. It is really hard. because I am also nursing my sick child. He is taking strong medicine, which requires good diet, but the food is not that good.
In a move to reduce congestion, the government refugee agency is now transferring some asylum seekers to other settlements across the country. But many prefer to stay here so that they can easily cross back to the DRC when the situation normalizes. Uganda maintains an open-door policy for refugees, but renewed fighting between the DRC government forces and the M23 rebel movement has pushed thousands more refugees into Uganda. The new influx is stretching the country's resources, and the knock-on effects from the Russia-Ukraine crisis have further complicated the situation.
I'm concerned that the worst may be ahead of us as the impact is felt in the months to come on food prices, not only globally, but increasingly in the region and even potentially here in Uganda. So it's something we're following very closely. We're working with our partners to make sure we're doing everything we can to continue the assistance that's vitally needed.
The UN Refugee Agency and other humanitarian groups have appealed for close to $50 million to strengthen Uganda's capacity to take care of refugees. But with the continued insecurity in the DR Congo, humanitarian agencies fear the fighting is likely to force more refugees into the country.
That report there from Kampala, Uganda, brings us to the end of this news edition. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. But for now, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.